Have you ever felt like you're walking alone through a storm that no one else can see? You keep moving, doing everything right, working late, staying disciplined, holding it all together. Yet, the world remains silent. No applause, no comfort, no one saying, "I'm proud of you." And you start to wonder if no one sees your struggle. Does it even matter? But here's the paradox that most people never understand. The moment when no one is there to lift you up is the exact moment life is preparing you to rise on your own. Because strength isn't built when you're surrounded by praise. It's built in the silence when the only voice you hear is your own. In this video, you'll learn 7 Stoic principles to move forward even when no one believes in you. And at the end, I'll reveal the silent mistake that 90% of strong people make, the one that secretly keeps them from ever becoming truly free. Stay with me, because if you understand this, you will never look at loneliness the same way again. There are seasons in life when you feel invisible. You're doing your best, yet nothing seems to move. No one seems to notice. It's as if the world is testing how much weight you can carry in silence. But that's not punishment. That's initiation. Carl Jung once wrote, "Every transformation begins with dissolution. Before something new can be born, something old must fall apart. And when you have no one left to depend on, when every hand disappears, that's not the end. It's the soul's signal that a new self is about to emerge. This is the moment when you stop waiting for someone to lift you and start discovering what you've always had inside. Your own source of strength, teach, your own source of peace, your own source of power. Today, we'll walk through 7 Stoic steps that guide this transformation. Loneliness, the silent teacher of strength. You'll see how solitude isn't a curse, but the fort that builds your foundation. Stop seeking emotional comfort from others. Why emotional independence, not approval, is the key to freedom. Stop complaining, the language of the victim ego. How to reclaim your energy by ending the habit of self-pity. Become your own source of validation. How to thrive when no one sees or praises your effort. Turn failure into fire. How every fall can burn away illusion and reveal your truest self. Act without relying on inspiration. How to move forward even when you don't feel ready. You don't need anyone to understand you, because everything you've ever looked for, strength, peace, understanding, has always been within. Each step builds upon the last, like climbing through layers of fog until you reach clear light. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why being unseen might just be the most sacred phase of your growth. So, take a breath. This isn't a video about loneliness. It's about rebirth, about learning how to rise, quietly, steadily, and unshakably, even when no one stands beside you. There comes a time in every person's life when the world begins to fall quiet. The friends who once filled your days start drifting away. Conversations lose their spark. Even laughter feels thinner, like it's echoing from a distance. You wake up one morning and realize no one is checking in anymore. The noise fades, the calls slow down, and suddenly, you're left with nothing but your own thoughts. Most people panic in that silence. They think something is wrong, that they're being left behind. But Jung called this stage the night sea journey, the passage every soul must take before it's reborn. It's not about being physically alone. It's about that invisible distance between you and the world you once belonged to. The moment you start to realize that what once excited you no longer touches your soul. At first, it hurts. Because loneliness isn't just silence, it's the death of the familiar. The version of you that once fit perfectly into every conversation, every friendship, every role, suddenly doesn't belong anywhere. And that disconnection feels like loss. But what if it isn't? What if it's growth in disguise? Carl Jung believed that when a person no longer resonates with the outer world, it's not a sign of failure, it's the soul beginning to separate from the persona, the false mask it once wore to belong. You are not lost. You're simply being called inward to meet the self beneath all the noise. Think about it. How many times have you used distraction to avoid silence? Scrolling for hours, chasing conversations that mean nothing, saying yes to things that drain you just to avoid being alone with your thoughts. But solitude isn't your enemy. It's the first classroom of strength. Let me tell you a story. I once knew a woman who had just gone through a painful divorce. She had always been the center of every gathering, surrounded by friends, laughter, and movement. But when her marriage ended, everything round her went still. Her apartment was too quiet, her evenings too long at first. She tried to escape it. She signed up for endless events, went on meaningless dates, filled every hour just to avoid that silence. But the emptiness followed her everywhere, until one night, exhausted, she decided to stop running. She turned off her phone, sat by the window, and just breathed. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then an hour. She cooked for herself, journaled, walked without music, read again. And slowly, something changed. She said, "Silence is no longer my enemy. It's where I finally hear myself." That's what Jung called the meeting with the self. When you stop begging the world to fill you and begin listening to the voice that has been waiting all along. Here's the paradox of loneliness. It feels like emptiness, but it's actually expansion. When no one is round to depend on, that pressure forces you to build your own stability. Like a climber without a safety rope, you learn to make every step count. Every action becomes a promise, and every promise kept builds an invisible armor called discipline. Loneliness doesn't break you, it reshapes you. It burns away every illusion that you needed someone else to hold you together. Because once you realize you can stand alone, no one can ever make you kneel again. Imagine an oak tree in winter. No leaves, no colors, just a dark silhouette against the cold wind. It looks lifeless to anyone passing by, but underground, its roots are growing deeper, preparing for spring. That's you. Every quiet season is your soul's winter, growing strength where no one can see. People often mistake solitude for weakness, but the truth is, it's proof that you're evolving. When the world goes silent, your true self starts to speak, and it will ask you questions no one else can answer. Who are you when no one is watching? What do you stand for when no one agrees? Can you still walk when no one claps? If you can face those questions honestly without escape, without distraction, you're not falling apart. You're being remade. Jung once wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. Loneliness is that secret order. It's the soul rearranging itself, building new meaning from the ashes of the old. And the only way through it is through it. You can't outthink loneliness. You can't outwork it. You can only sit with it long enough to let it reveal what it came to teach. And one day, when the silence no longer frightens you, you'll hear that whisper deep inside. It's time to rise. That's when solitude stops being isolation and becomes rebirth. Because no one is coming to save you. But that's not a tragedy. It's liberation from this moment forward. Remember this, loneliness isn't proof that you're forgotten. It's proof that you're evolving. And when the world finally goes quiet, that's not emptiness you're hearing. It's your soul whispering back to you for the first time. Pause. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you let silence teach you something? After loneliness comes another test. It's subtle, quiet, and often disguised as love. It's the habit of seeking comfort in others, believing that someone else should make you feel whole. You've probably heard it before. Find someone who makes you happy. But what if that belief is exactly what keeps you from ever feeling at peace? Carl Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter most." What he meant was simple. We aren't destroyed by solitude. We're drained by dependency, by the endless attempt to have someone else fill our emptiness. When you rely on others for emotional balance, you give them quiet power over your peace. Every silence becomes a threat. Every slow reply feels like rejection. Every disagreement feels like the world is collapsing. It's not love. It's emotional dependence, the invisible chain that keeps your happiness tied to someone else's behavior. I once met a woman in a therapy group who embodied this perfectly. She confessed that she panicked whenever her boyfriend didn't reply to her messages. She checked her phone dozens of times a day. Each minute of silence felt like proof that something was wrong. I know it's irrational, she said, but when he goes quiet, I feel like I disappear. After months of self-work, she discovered the root of her fear. When she was a child, every time she cried or got upset, her parents told her, "Don't be dramatic," and walked away. Her unconscious learned a painful lesson. Your feelings don't matter. And since then, she's spent her life searching for anyone to prove that she does. Jung called this emotional projection, the act of using others as mirrors to measure your worth. When they respond, you feel valuable. When they withdraw, you crumble. But here's the truth. No one can be your savior forever. Because the moment your peace depends on someone else's presence, you've already lost it. The Stoics had a clear view on this. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, then do not enter into contests in which victory is not in your control." Depending on others for emotional reassurance is exactly that kind of contest. You can't control another's mood, response, or silence. But you can control how you hold yourself in that silence. That is emotional independence, the ability to stay centered even when the world around you is uncertain. It doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean shutting people out. It means becoming your own anchor before you reach for someone else's hand. Because what exhausts us isn't loneliness, it's waiting for others to rescue us from it. Every time you expect someone else to fix your sadness, you silently declare, "I am powerless without you," and that belief quietly poisons your strength. The next time sadness rises, pause. Don't run to the phone. Don't reach for a distraction. Just place your hand over your heart and whisper, "I'm still here." That simple act of staying with your emotion instead of escaping it is the beginning of emotional maturity. It's what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming an integrated, autonomous self. It's when you stop merging with the collective and start walking as your own person. People often confuse emotional independence with detachment. But they're not the same. Detachment says, "I don't care." Independence says, "I care, but I won't abandon myself in the process." When you learn to comfort yourself, you stop craving validation. You stop obsessing over unread messages. You stop giving silence the power to define your worth. You begin to understand something profound. It's not their reply that makes you real, it's your ability to stay grounded without it. Think of it this way. If your happiness can be taken away by someone else's silence, it was never truly yours, Jung said. All forms of dependence are the shadow of love. We call it attachment, but it's often just fear of being abandoned, fear of being unseen, fear of facing the silence alone. But when you look closely at that fear, it transforms. You realize that what you thought was emptiness was actually an invitation. An invitation to become the parent you once needed but never had. To give yourself the safety you've been searching for in others. And that's when emotional independence is born, not from defiance, but from deep self-compassion. Because once you stop handing over the keys to your peace, something incredible happens. You become unshakable. You still love, still connect, still care deeply, but without losing yourself in the process. You stop seeking rescuers and start becoming one for yourself. I once heard someone say, "The strongest person is not the one who needs no one, but the one who can need without losing themselves." That's the essence of Stoicism. You can have relationships, friendships, intimacy, but your peace no longer depends on them. You are no longer addicted to attention, or the illusion that love means constant reassurance. You start to see that the most powerful love isn't the one that completes you. It's the one that meets you whole, and from that place, you finally understand what you meant when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." So if today you feel unseen, unheard, or unloved, remember this. You don't need anyone to save you. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. When you learn to do that, to be your own comfort, your own peace, your own validation, you'll realize you were never as fragile as you thought. In fact, you are always the one meant to lift yourself. Now tell me, when was the last time you truly comforted yourself, instead of waiting for someone else to do it? Once you stop depending on others for comfort, a new challenge quietly appears. It's one of the most seductive traps of the ego. Complaining. It doesn't seem dangerous. In fact, it feels natural. You tell yourself you're just venting. You say things like, "I'm exhausted. No one appreciates what I do. I try so hard." But nothing changes. But here's the truth. Every complaint is an affirmation of powerlessness. Each time you repeat it, you reinforce the identity of a victim. Carl Jung called this the shadow of self-pity, the part of you that clings to your suffering because it gives you a story to hold on to. Oh, and the ego loves stories where it's the one being wronged. Because as long as you're the victim, you're excused from responsibility. It often starts small. You go through a tough day at work. You vent to a friend. They sympathize, and for a moment, it feels good. That sympathy becomes your hit of validation. But over time, you start chasing that feeling. You talk about the same pain again and again, hoping that retelling it will somehow heal it. It doesn't. It only deepens the wound. The Stoics had a sharp insight about this. They believed that every word you speak shapes your reality, and that language is the architecture of the soul. When you complain, you're not describing your world, you're programming it. Each "why me" becomes a quiet spell that traps you where you are. A viewer once told me a story that stayed with me. After being betrayed by close friends, she spent 6 months telling everyone how cruel they'd been. She said, "I was obsessed with making sure people knew what they did to me." But one night, she wrote in her journal, "If no one were around to listen, would I still tell this story?" The answer was no. The next morning, she stopped repeating the past and started writing what she wanted to create. "I realized," she said, "it wasn't their betrayal that was keeping me stuck. It was the story I kept replaying." That's what complaining does. It freezes you in time. It gives you the illusion of movement, because you're talking, analyzing, explaining, but you're not evolving. You're circling. You're warned. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you complain, you're letting your unconscious run the show. You're living on autopilot, ruled by old pain you haven't yet faced. The Stoics would say, stop feeding the pain. Observe it, understand it, but never feed it, because every complaint has a hidden message underneath. When you say, "I'm tired," maybe what you really mean is, "I haven't honored my limits." When you say, "No one helps me," perhaps you mean, "I haven't asked clearly." And when you say, "Nothing ever changes," maybe the truth is, "I'm too afraid to." When you strip away the emotion, what's left is information, the truth you can actually act on. That's the moment your energy shifts from reaction to creation. Complaining drains. Action restores. Think of a river. The current pushes against a stone, wearing it down, reshaping it over time. The stone doesn't resist, it endures. And through that endurance, it becomes smooth, refined, beautiful. Life is the same. It doesn't pause because you complain. It keeps flowing. It keeps shaping you. And if you stop cursing the current, you will realize it's not trying to drown you. It's teaching you how to swim. The Stoic mind understands this paradox. Pain doesn't disappear when you stop complaining. It transforms. Because the moment you say, "What can I do with this?" instead of "Why me?" you shift from victim to author. You reclaim your agency. But let's be honest, the ego will resist this transformation. It thrives on the comfort of being pitied. As long as someone listens to your suffering, it feels alive. It whispers, "Don't let this go. People will forget you." But the soul wants the opposite. The soul wants silence, action, transcendence. Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That's the essence of maturity. Moving from narration to creation. So when you catch yourself about to complain, pause. Ask, "What can I build with this?" Even the smallest action counts. Write one sentence. Go for a walk. Fix one small thing in your life. Do anything except repeat the same story. Because every small act you take is a declaration to the universe. I am no longer a victim of this. You can still acknowledge pain. You can still feel anger, sadness, exhaustion. But there's a difference between feeling an emotion and worshipping it. When you stop worshipping pain, you turn it into wisdom. Remember, the world doesn't owe you understanding. It owes you nothing, but you owe yourself growth. And that begins the moment you stop speaking the language of the victim. From that silence, a different voice will start to emerge. Not the one that says, "Look at what they did to me," but the one that says, "Look at what I learned from it." So the next time you feel tempted to complain, try this instead. Take a deep breath and say quietly, "This is not happening to me. It's happening for me." Because the difference between being powerless and being powerful is just one sentence. And now ask yourself, if no one were around to hear your story, would you still tell it? After you stop complaining and begin taking responsibility, another test appears, quieter, but sharper. It's not about failure or pain anymore. It's about invisibility. You show up every day. You give your best. You work hard, stay disciplined, remain kind. And yet, no one notices. No praise, no gratitude, no recognition. Just silence. That's the moment most people give up. Not because they fear effort, but because they fear being unseen. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Why terrifying? Because to truly accept yourself means no longer hiding behind the opinions of others. It means walking through life without the crutch of external approval. When you stop seeking validation, you discover an uncomfortable truth. The world will often stay silent, even when you do your best. And that silence can feel like rejection. But it isn't. It's initiation. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he reminded himself every morning, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He didn't write his meditations for applause. He wrote them to strengthen his soul when no one was watching. I once spoke to a woman who had worked for years in a corporate office. She was the first to arrive and the last to leave. When awards came round, her name was never mentioned. Her colleagues received the praise. She received the silence. She told me, "I started to feel invisible." But one day, she decided to stop working to be seen and start working to see herself. Every night before leaving, she wrote down 3 things she did well that day. No one else had to notice she noticed. And something shifted. "I realized," she said, "external praise lasts minutes, but self-recognition lasts for days." That's the turning point between the dependent ego and the integrated self. The immature ego performs for applause. The mature soul acts from integrity. In Jungian psychology, this is called individuation, the process of moving from a life of approval seeking to a life of authenticity. It's when your worth stops fluctuating with other people's reactions. You stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Did I honor myself today?" Because the truth is, every applause fades. Every compliment has an expiration date. If your motivation depends on them, your peace will always be temporary. But when you learn to validate yourself, to say "well done" even when the world is silent, you become unstoppable. You move from chasing to creating, from pleasing to becoming. There's a story from Greek mythology that illustrates this beautifully. Cassandra, the woman gifted with the power of prophecy by Apollo, but cursed so that no one would believe her. She saw truth after truth, but no one listened. They called her mad. Still, she spoke. Still, she stayed loyal to what she knew. Her story is a metaphor for all strong souls, those who honor their truth even when no one validates it. Because in the silence of disbelief, true integrity is born. Likewise, in modern life, you may work hard and go unnoticed. You may speak truth and be ignored. You may give love and receive none in return. But those moments are not the universe punishing you. They are tests of faith in your own value. Here's the paradox. You cannot become your full self if you still need others to confirm you exist. External validation is like sunlight through glass. It warms you, but it doesn't sustain you. Inner validation is like fire. It burns from within, no matter the weather outside. The Stoics would remind you that self-respect comes from actions aligned with your principles, not from approval that aligns with your ego. When you do what's right, not what's rewarded, you build something indestructible. Trust in yourself, and once you trust yourself, no amount of silence can make you feel small again. But here's where most people falter. When recognition doesn't come, they withdraw. They slow down. They start to think, what's the point if no one cares? That's the ego speaking again, demanding witnesses. But the soul doesn't need an audience, it needs alignment. When you act from that place, you no longer need the spotlight. You become the light. Your presence changes, not louder, but steadier. You walk into a room and people can feel it. Not because you seek attention, but because you no longer need it. This is what Jung meant when he said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. When you faced your own silence, you stop fearing there's validation from others is a reflection. Validation from within is creation, and creation is always stronger than reflection. To become your own witness is the highest act of respect you can give yourself. It doesn't mean you stop listening to feedback, it means you filter it through wisdom, not hunger. You still value others, but you don't collapse without them. When the world goes quiet, you can still hear your own voice saying, "I'm proud of what I did today," and that voice steady, clear, unshaken will become your anchor. So if today you feel unseen, unheard, unappreciated, take it as a sacred test. The universe is asking, can you keep walking, even when no one claps? Because that's when you know your strength is real, not borrowed, not dependent, real. The oak tree doesn't ask the forest for permission to grow, it simply rises. So must you. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you told yourself, "Well done," without waiting for anyone else to say it first? Even after you've learned to validate yourself, life will still test you. It doesn't end when you finally become strong. In fact, that's usually when it begins again. Because strength is not a permanent state. It's a muscle that must be torn to grow. You'll stumble, you'll fall, you'll fail, and you'll wonder, how could this happen after everything I've learned? But Jung once wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Every fall is the soul's way of revealing what's still unhealed within you. Failure doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to refine you. I once knew a woman who ran a small business with a friend. They worked side by side for your shared dreams, long nights, endless sacrifice. Then one day, her partner betrayed her. He emptied their accounts and vanished. She lost everything: money, trust, stability, direction. For months, she lived in shame. She kept asking, how could I have been so blind? But one day, her therapist asked her a question that changed everything. If this isn't an ending, what is it teaching you? She went silent. Then she said quietly, maybe I never truly listened to my intuition. From that day, she stopped replaying the betrayal and started writing down what she was learning from it. She journaled every night, not to complain, but to understand. A year later, she opened her business again, smaller, steadier, wiser. She said, I'm no longer afraid to fall, because every time I fall, I meet a more honest version of myself. That's what failure does. It burns away illusion. It humbles the ego that thought it had it all figured out. And it brings you closer to truth, raw, painful, but real. In a letter to Freud, Jung once wrote, mistakes are, after all, the foundations of truth. It's not perfection that builds wisdom, it's failure faced with awareness. Every time you stumble, the universe hands you a mirror. It shows you the parts of yourself still clinging to fear, to pride, to control. You can either look away, or you can look deeper. Those who grow look deeper. The Stoics saw failure not as tragedy, but as training. Seneca wrote, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. To them, every loss was a forge, every setback a teacher. Modern science even agrees. When you fail, your brain activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the region that detects the gap between expectation and reality. If you respond with fear, your body releases cortisol, freezing you in regret. But if you respond with action, your prefrontal cortex lights up, releasing dopamine, the chemical of progress and hope. Regret paralyzes you, action heals you. That's how failure becomes fire. The same flame that burns can also illuminate if you decide to look for the lesson instead of the wound. The ancients called this transformation katabasis, a descent before rebirth. Just as the mythical phoenix throws itself into the fire to rise again, so too must we learn to burn away what no longer serves us. When the phoenix burns, it isn't dying, it's shedding. When you fall, you're not losing yourself, you're losing what's outdated, what's no longer needed. You can't grow in safety, because safety lulls the soul to sleep. Only risk, pain, and loss can awaken it fully. And once you've risen from the ashes, you realize something extraordinary. The fire didn't destroy you, it revealed you. Failure doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. It means you tried, reached, cared, and dared. It means you had the courage to leave the comfort of certainty. The Stoics taught that when life knocks you down, it's giving you an opportunity to practice what you preach. Anyone can talk about resilience when things are easy, but when you fall and still choose to stand again without bitterness, without complaint, that's real mastery. Every failure is a mirror. You can stare into it and see a victim, or you can see a craftsman, someone shaping the self, stroke by stroke, through trial and error. Think of the blacksmith. Each blow of the hammer reshapes the metal, each spark, each burn, each fracture essential to its final form. The metal doesn't argue with the fire. It yields, it melts, it reforms. That's how it becomes a sword. The soul works the same way. Each failure, each rejection, each heartbreak, it's not punishment. It's refinement. You are being shaped by the very things that tried to break you. If you can enjoy the process, you'll emerge stronger, sharper, more awake. There's a moment after every fall when you feel like giving up. That's normal. But if you can take just one small step, just one, it changes everything. Because motion rekindles meaning. Even a single act of will, no matter how small, reminds the soul, I am still here. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's the ground you push off from. So if you've failed, if you've lost something or someone, remember this. You're standing in the ashes of your old self. Yes, but that's exactly where rebirth begins. Jung once said, only when we are in the deepest darkness do we see the light. That light is not coming from outside. It's rising from within. When you rise from your own ashes, you stop being afraid of the fire. Because you become it. You become the flame that no failure can extinguish. So now ask yourself, what if your failure wasn't a mistake at all? What if it was the fire sent to forge the person you were meant to become? After failure comes something even more difficult, continuation. Because once the fire fades, you're left with ashes and routine. No applause, no adrenaline, no sense of excitement. Just you and the long road ahead. This is where most people stop. They say, I'll wait until I feel ready, or I just need to find motivation. But they never realize motivation is a mirage. It appears when the work is already in motion, not before. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. They believed that will, not emotion, should be the ruler of one's life. Epictetus said, no great thing is created suddenly. He knew that mastery isn't born from bursts of passion. It's forged in quiet persistence. Carl Jung went further. He described will as the organizing force of the psyche. It's not just the strength to act. It's the ability to realign your entire being toward a higher purpose. Even when your emotions rebel, there will be days when you feel completely drained. No spark, no excitement, just exhaustion. And that's exactly when the battle for your soul begins. Because if solitude forged your strength, then discipline is what sustains it. When you act only when you feel inspired, your life becomes a roller coaster. Up one day, down the next. But when you act from will, not mood, you become steady, unmoved by the weather of emotion. Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine, a single mother, once told me, I wake up at 5 a.m. every day. I cook, I work, I barely have time to breathe. One day, she admitted, I think I've lost my passion. Everything feels mechanical. But something changed when her son asked her one night, Mom, what happened to your dream bakery? She went silent. She realized she'd been waiting for motivation that would never come. That night, she decided to begin again, not for excitement, but for responsibility. To herself, to her child, to the woman she wanted to become. She started small, waking up 15 minutes earlier to read, writing down 3 daily goals, saving every spare dollar for her dream. Some mornings she was exhausted. Some nights she cried, but she kept going. I stopped waiting for passion, she said. I just needed will, because my son needs to see his mother not give up. A year later, she opened her bakery. No one helped, no one cheered, but she did it anyway. Not from inspiration, but from integrity. That's the power of will. It builds quietly, while emotion fluctuates. Modern psychology now supports what the Stoics knew all along. Angela Duckworth, who coined the term grit, found that long-term success isn't determined by talent or intelligence, but by sustained perseverance, acting when enthusiasm fades. Passion starts the race, will finishes it. In Stoic philosophy, this is the essence of freedom, to act according to your values, not your moods. Jung described true freedom the same way. Freedom of will is the ability to do gladly that which I must do. Freedom isn't doing what feels good. It's doing what's right, even when it's hard. Here's the paradox. Inspiration is fleeting. but will grows with use. It's like a muscle. The more you act without waiting to feel like it, the stronger your sense of purpose becomes. Every time you keep your promise to yourself, to write that page, to train your body, to sit in silence, to keep going, you build trust with your soul. And trust is more powerful than emotion, because emotion will always fluctuate. But trust will carry you through every storm. The Stoics believe that divine order, logos, moves through disciplined action. When you rise above emotion and choose will, you align with that order. You stop being a slave to moods and become an architect of your own destiny. To live this way is not easy. It means acting without applause, working without reward, showing up when no one notices. But it's also the purest kind of peace, the kind that comes from knowing you did what needed to be done, not because you felt like it, but because it was right. And when you live like that, something changes in your eyes. You stop chasing inspiration because you become the source of it. Most people wait for the right time. The Stoic waits for nothing. He knows that will creates its own moment. He doesn't ask, "Do I feel ready?" He asks, "What must I do now?" Because every act of discipline, no matter how small, is a form of self-respect. Every morning you rise when it's hard. Every day you move forward without praise. You're not just building habits. You're building faith in yourself, and that faith is unbreakable. So if you're tired today, uninspired, uncertain, don't wait for motivation. Take one small step. Write one sentence. Do one act that aligns with who you want to become. Because you don't need to feel ready to begin. You just need to begin, and readiness will follow. Inspiration doesn't create will. Will creates inspiration. And every time you act with will, you rise a little higher above your emotions, closer to the version of yourself that no failure, no silence, and no loneliness can shake. So ask yourself now, when was the last time you did what was right? Not because you felt like it, but because your soul knew you must. There comes a moment, after all the battles have been fought, after the noise, the silence, the discipline, and the fire, when you realize something both heartbreaking and liberating. No one will ever fully understand you, and that's okay. You can explain your choices, your pain, your growth, but others will still see only fragments, filtered through their own fears, their own projections. They can't see what you've lived through. They can't hear the war that happened inside you. That realization used to hurt. You wanted to be seen, to be recognized, to be understood. But slowly, you begin to see the truth. You weren't meant to be understood. You were meant to be known by yourself. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart, because everything you've been searching for, peace, validation, love, understanding, was never hiding in other people. It was buried under layers of noise within you. When you stop demanding that others get you, you create space to finally meet yourself. And that's when harmony begins. For years, you may have tried to explain yourself to friends, family, partners, hoping they would understand the way you think, the depth of what you feel. But people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. And in a world where everyone is busy searching for their own reflection, few have the capacity to see yours. So stop expecting understanding from the outside. It's not rejection, it's limitation. And that's not your burden to carry. The moment you release that expectation, you begin to return inward, where your contradictions start to harmonize. Your fear and courage, your pain and healing, your light and shadow. This is what Jung called the integration of the self, the point where you no longer need the world to agree with you because you've learned to live in agreement with your soul. I once heard the story of a young painter She had spent years creating art that pleased others, soft colors, trendy designs, things that sold well. But over time, she felt hollow. Her work was admired, but her spirit was silent. One day, exhausted, she packed her bags and left the city. She rented a small house by a lake, turned off her phone, and spent a month painting with no goal except to listen. At first, nothing came. But after a few quiet days, the old noise in her head, "Will they like this? Will this sell?" started to fade, and in the stillness, something ancient spoke. She began painting what her soul wanted to say. When she returned, her art was different, raw, and tamed, alive. A gallery in Berlin discovered her work by chance and invited her to exhibit. She smiled and said, "When I stopped trying to be seen, people began to truly see me." That's the paradox of self-realization. When you stop performing, you begin radiating. When you stop chasing understanding, you become understanding itself. You no longer explain your piece. You embody it. You no longer chase love. You radiate it. You no longer need to prove worth. You are worth. Because when you finally come home to yourself, the world no longer has the power to define you. The Stoics compared the awakened soul to a lighthouse. It doesn't chase ships. It doesn't shout, "Look at me." It simply stands still, steady in the storm, and by doing so, guides others who are lost. That's what it means to stop seeking outwardly, to stand quietly in your own light, to let the world misunderstand you if it must. Because peace no longer depends on their comprehension, only your alignment. And here's the beauty. When you accept yourself in your entirety, light and shadow, strength and weakness, you emit an energy that calms others. People may not understand you, but they'll feel safe around you. Real connection doesn't come from being perfectly understood. It comes from being completely authentic. Carl Rogers, the psychotherapist, once said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." You don't become better by forcing change. You grow naturally once you stop fighting who you are. That's the quiet miracle of self-acceptance. When you stop seeking completion outside, you realize you are never incomplete. Everything you've been chasing, love, peace, clarity, was simply your own reflection, waiting for you to turn inward. So if today you feel unseen, if you've outgrown people who can't meet you where you are, don't mourn it. It means that your soul has outgrown its old language. It's now speaking in silence, and that silence isn't emptiness. It's translation, the language of your next evolution. Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." When you stop asking the world, "Who am I?" and start asking yourself, "What does my soul need right now?" you awaken from the dream of dependency. You stop chasing light, because you realize you are the source. So if no one understands you, if your path feels lonely, if your growth has created distance, don't shrink back. Keep walking, because your alignment will eventually attract those who are aligned to. Until then, stand tall, like the lighthouse in the night sea, silent, steady, unbending, guiding not by noise, but by presence. And maybe one day, you'll look back and realize the solitude, the silence, the discipline. It was never punishment. It was the path home. You were never waiting to be understood. You were waiting to understand yourself. And once you do, you'll find that everything you've ever sought, love, peace, strength, belonging, was right there all along, inside. Now ask yourself, do you still need the world to understand you? Or are you finally ready to understand yourself? You've walked through the storm. You've stood in silence. You faced yourself when no one was there to hold you. And now, you've arrived, not at the end, but at a beginning that only solitude could reveal. Let's pause for a moment and look back. The 7 steps to rise when no one is there. Step 1. Loneliness. The silent teacher of strength. You learned that solitude isn't a punishment. It's a forge, a place where your roots grow deep beneath the surface while the world above lies still. Step 2. Stop seeking emotional comfort from others. You discovered that emotional independence isn't coldness. It's the power to stay grounded when others withdraw, to be your own anchor in the waves. Step 3. Stop complaining. The language of the victim ego. You realized that every complaint drains your strength. That life doesn't pause for your pain, but it can transform it if you stop repeating the story and start creating a new one. Step 4. Become your own source of validation. You found that the silence of no recognition is not rejection, it's refinement. When the world stops clapping, your soul begins listening. Step 5. Turn failure into fire. You learned that failure isn't a verdict. It's the furnace that burns away illusion and forges authenticity. From the ashes, you don't just recover, you rise. Step 6. Act without relying on inspiration. You discovered that will is stronger than emotion. That freedom isn't doing what feels good, it's doing what's right, even when it's hard. Step 7. You don't need anyone to understand you. You reached the quiet truth. That peace doesn't come from being understood, but from understanding yourself. And when you finally come home to your own heart, you stop chasing what was never missing. Look at what this path has revealed. You began believing that no one was there for you. But along the way, you discovered the one who always was you. The Stoics called this alignment with nature, living according to the higher order of your being. Jung called it individuation, the union of light and shadow into wholeness. Different words, same truth. You are not fragments trying to be assembled. You are a whole being, remembering yourself piece by piece. There's a kind of strength that doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need witnesses. It simply endures quietly, faithfully, with eyes clear and spirit calm. That's the strength this journey gives you. Not the kind that conquers others, but the kind that conquers your own chaos. Because when you stop waiting for someone to lift you up, you realize you were never broken. You were just learning how to stand. So if today you find yourself in the fog again, if no one calls, no one checks in, no one sees how hard you're trying, remember this: your silence is sacred. Your struggle is not invisible. It's the proof that your soul is still brewing, and one day, when you look back on this chapter, you'll see that the quiet nights, the unanswered efforts, the invisible seasons were not detours. They were the foundation, the roots that made you unshakable. Take a deep breath. Place your hand over your heart. Listen. That sound, faint, steady, alive, is proof that even when the world goes silent, life still speaks within you. That's your light. That's your fire. Everything you seek, strength, love, peace, understanding, was never outside of you. It's been waiting here all along, under the noise, under the fear, patiently waiting for you to notice. If this message found you in a moment of silence, remember, silence isn't emptiness. It's preparation. And if this video reminded you that you're enough, then share it with someone who might need that same reminder tonight. Because sometimes, one quiet message can keep another soul from giving up. And before you go, I want you to write one word in the comments. Still. Not as a word of survival, but as a declaration. Still standing, still learning, still here. Because even when no one stands beside you, you still choose to stand with yourself. You were never meant to be saved. You were meant to awaken. And the moment you realize that, you'll see that you were never truly alone. You were just becoming who you were always meant to be. This is StoicCraft, where ancient wisdom meets the modern soul. If you found light in these words, stay with us, because this journey, your journey, has only just begun.